All right, and that is Eddie Izzard. So go ahead and enjoy their stand up. For me, I remember Eddie Izzard from, being in high school, and that, Cake and Death was probably one of my absolute favorite stand ups. My younger brother, Cody, introduced me to Eddie Izzard, and I recall Cody going through a breakup, and we watched that for over and over and over again, and just cracked us up. So anyway, again, it was from 1999. If you watch the whole thing, I don't know how much of the stand-up really stands up to today's humor. But either way, Eddie Izzard is definitely someone who's paved the way for many, many other people. Eddie has been doing stand up for over 35 years, okay, and in drag. And in 2021, Eddie decided to go by the pronoun of she. And many people are taken back by this. So many people are like, whoa, 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 Eddie, what are you doing? All of a sudden you're she. And which is ironic because back in 2017, Eddie came out as trans and then no one even said a thing. They're like, well, we know this because we see you and this is what you tell us. But for some reason, when Eddie came out in 2021 and went by she, it became shocking. And I think for many people, the reason why it became shocking was that Eddie does movies as well and plays male characters. And there's this back and forth. And I think for many followers of Eddie to see Eddie go by she, to them didn't make sense because of the way Eddie had portrayed who they were throughout their career. But there's something really beautiful about that. And so Eddie, in a recent article, says that actually she, because we're going to talk Eddie as she, Izzard says that actually she had not intended to be so definitive about their gender. And she had always talked about being in boy mode. And then this is one thing I like about Eddie Izzard is that they talk about their modes in their stand up. So she always talked about being in boy mode most of the time and girl mode part of the time, hence the drag. Boy mode had dominated, and now it was time for girl mode to take center stage. But on occasions, she would still like the freedom to be he. Okay, she soon discovered that wasn't an option, though. Okay, so it's important to understand that struggle of, Eddie wanted to be he and she, and after a while, Eddie started to realize that she is who she really was. While working on a movie called Stay Close, I haven't seen it, so I don't know. This was back in 2021, I believe. Um, Eddie had plays a small town lawyer called Harry. So Eddie Izzard is now playing a male character. And as in quotes here, Eddie says, as I'm playing a male role, I suggested people go back to calling me him and he for this. And what the world seems to have said to me is, you can change your pronouns, but you can't use he and she as well. You've just got to be she, and you've got to be she and her from now on because we've only got so much time on our hands. Thank you so much. Okay. So how does Eddie feel about that? Eddie says, great. I've been promoted to she, and it's a great honor. And it's important to understand that now there's almost a freedom that Eddie gets to choose, gets to be a thing that Eddie, I think deep down had always wanted to be, which is she. The thing is, she says, when she first came out as transvestite in 1985, by the way, she was pretty much making the same statement as she is now. For Izzard, it was never just about having a thing for dresses or high heels. It was always about identifying as female. As far as she was concerned, being a transvestite simply meant being transgender without physically transitioning. And that's that important part that Eddie Izzard talks about in their stand up, at least back in 1999. She says for 4 years, she was 4 years old when she first had an inkling that she was transgender, even if she had no words for it back then. Okay, so be mindful that people have been questioning it, who knows how long. My brother's questioned his sexuality. We get this opportunity now to be fluid, to try and figure out who we are, and we get to find out for ourselves without society telling us. And it's a really beautiful thing to be. And oftentimes people are afraid of it. They're afraid of, not being wildly masculine or not being feminine enough. And I've gone through that myself where there were times when I cut my hair real short and they called me Kyle. And I was so deathly afraid of being a boy. I don't know why. When I was as a very young child a very tomboyish thing, but because in eighth grade it was a social, how dare you be a boy when you're a girl type of mentality in the 90s, that I was afraid of being seen a boy. I was afraid of, you know, having that identity for some reason. And even though my hair was really short, I wore a flowery backpack and dresses and a bow in my hair because it was so important to me that I was feminine to you, that I didn't even get a chance to explore. Like, maybe I like having the short hair and being a tomboy and having fun. And then I might have taken it too far and really not figured out who I really was. Or maybe I was figuring out who I was. Being bullied, as we talk about, it's very traumatizing. The name Kyle, because they called me Kyle with the short hair, and the flat chest or whatever it was they were, rubbing the door and they're like, "This is your chest, Kylene." Stuff like that, where it really kind of affected me, emotionally, mentally, because I panicked and I was like, oh, I don't want to be teased anymore. I must be feminine. I must be feminine. And so this is why it's so important that we give ourselves the opportunity to decide who we get to be and who we want to be. I've had students in the past, they changed their names 3 times within the semester. And I'm like, I'm all for it. You tell me what you want. You figure it out. As you're growing and developing, what do you want to be? And some held on to names that people, whether it was they were born with or from friends or whatever, and then they would change and go, I can't be that name anymore. That's not who I am. And I love that. That's fine. Please, you do you. You do the thing that you have to do to try and figure out who you are. I can't tell you how often I wanted to change my name from Kylene. I still get people going, Kaylee, Kylie, Carly. I'm like, it's Kylene, please. Thank you. It is what it is, and I've learned to live with it. But there's times where I wanted to be something more simple. I wanted to be my middle name, Rebecca, because Becky or Rebecca just seems so, easy, and just, it made me feel whole, versus Kylene, which was so no one could get the name right. And then it really messed with my head and my identity, especially being a tomboy and then being teased to being from, wanting to be more masculine to force me into being more feminine. So long story short, this is why identity matters. One thing I really want you to be mindful also is, the words that we use it because maybe we just don't know. And so ask questions. If maybe there's someone in the class who you can see might have more knowledge on the subject, reach out to them. Reach out to them to tell me something, or vice versa. Let us know more about what we need to know from your point of view. And that's what our discussions are about. That's what our narrative is about, is to give you the voice. This is your platform. This is your opportunity. Tell us more. Tell us who you are. What are your experiences? What's traumatized you to make you do the things that you do? And write about it. Compose. Remember, composition is identity, right? And literacy. We want to be more literate in you and the things around us, so we can just have a better understanding. I can't speak for you or whoever. I can only speak to my experience. But I think it's important that you have this platform in your narrative to express to us, who are you really? Who do you want to be? Who are you afraid of not being? That's the other thing, right? How often are we, I remember growing up in a church, I was so afraid that I wasn't going to be a good enough Christian. I wasn't going to be this. I wasn't going to be that. When in the end, and we'll talk about this later, when I went to a Catholic school in Hawaii, all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I don't have to fall into these constructs. I don't have to fall into these things that I felt that I had to be. I could be whatever I want. And that's what I want us to feel in this class. You could be whatever you want. What is that? You tell me. All right. So whether it's identity through jobs, through experiences, I don't know. You get to tell me. So anywho, on that note, I want you to make sure that you read I Want a Dyke for President. Because again, we talk about humanness and how much we want people around us to be like us, but then we look at people in power and who we choose as presidents or delegates or congressmen or whatever. And this isn't to be political, it's to be understanding of who we are as human beings and why do we do the things that we do. And we want a voice for us. If we're going to talk about who we are and identity, that starts first and foremost with voting. Okay, and it's very important. A lot of people have this or that. I don't want to be on either side. I fucking hate politics. I think it's bullshit. I think it manipulates us in a way that makes us all very toxic, at least right now where we're at. Doesn't matter what side you're on, it is a very toxic place. So I want us to kind of hone into understanding that by reading the poem I Want a Dyke for President. And it's understand that labeling is important here because the speaker is emphasizing the lack of humanness in a president. Okay, the lack of humanness in a president. In fact, let me get to that really quick, and I want you to understand this. I'm going to read it to you really quick if you haven't read it already. I want a dyke for president. I want a person with AIDS for president, and I want a fag for vice president, and I want someone with no health insurance, and I want someone who grew up in a place where the earth is so saturated with toxic waste that they didn't have a choice about getting leukemia. I want a president that had an abortion at 16, and I want a candidate who isn't the lesser of two evils. And I want a president who lost their last lover to AIDS, who still sees it in their eyes every time they laid down to rest, who held their lover in their arms, who knew they were dying. I want a president with no air conditioning. I want a president who has stood in the line at the clinic, at the DMV, at the welfare office, and who's been unemployed and laid off and sexually harassed and gay bashed and deported. I want someone who has spent the night in the tombs and had the cross burned on their lawn and survived rape. I want someone who has been in love and been hurt, who respects sex, who's made mistakes and learned from them. I want a black woman for president. I want someone with bad teeth. I want someone who has eaten hospital food, someone who has cross dresses and who has done drugs and been in therapy. I want someone who has committed civil disobedience, and I want to know why this isn't possible. I want to know why we started learning somewhere down the line that a president is always a clown, always a John, and never a hooker, and always a boss and never a worker, always a liar, always a thief, and never caught. All right, what I would like you to do first and foremost in your discussion is, when did this poem get written? All right, find out, where was this poem written, what time, all right, and by who? And why is it so important that when we look at those words and you deep down in your heart, you can say, that's true, I don't actually want those as president. Why? Why are we so afraid of these human characteristics in a president? Why do we want something or somebody so untouchable in office? Is it maybe we want someone to lead who's nothing like us? Do we want someone we know flying the plane, right? Do we want someone we know doing the surgery? Is there this inadequacy within ourselves that we feel that makes us afraid of having someone like us as president? That's a question to ask yourself that I want you to consider in this discussion. Do we prefer the unreachable to lead us, to make us feel that anything is possible? Are we afraid that having someone in power who is like us because we feel inadequate, is that the ultimate fear? Is it similar to, again, not wanting to know who's flying the plane? Do we want us flying the plane? Do we want us doing the surgery? Do we trust us? All right. Do we feel that it's safer to be distant from those in power? Is that the thing? Is it feel safer knowing we don't really connect to that person so they can lead us because they don't connect to us? They can make the decisions that maybe we don't have the heart to make? Is that the case? Or is it just the fact that those of us who are human, those of us who have experienced this, don't have the capabilities to make certain difficult decisions? Or is it just that we cannot afford to be president? That we who are working so hard, who have these jobs, who have these children, who don't have this other life, is it just that we just can't afford it? That we don't have the resources to be president? Is money the issue?